In this strange time of coronavirus, we're really delighted we can gather together online and be here to open the 10th National MND Australia Conference. I often think about how grateful I am that technology has allowed me to remain socially connected despite losing my voice and mobility. And I think this is something we can all appreciate during lockdown. We'd like to acknowledge that we are all on Indigenous land, in our case what is sometimes called Guringai country, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. We particularly acknowledge First Nations people affected by MND. To open the conference, we are going to tell you a little of our MND stories and what we have learned along the way. Every person living with MND has a different story. And our stories are included in the stories of our loved ones.
Our stories are all different too, whether it's a person who has MND, like me with my mum, or a partner, child, sibling, grandparent, cousin, aunt or uncle, niece or nephew, colleague, teacher, or friend. Our family story began in 2012, before Mum was diagnosed, before we even knew MND was a possibility. I was 6 years old. I remember one day Mum and I were walking to school and she fell over. We stopped as she got herself up, and as we continued walking, she told me she was going to see the doctor.
I noticed other signs my body was misbehaving. At first it was little things like cramping legs I could write off as trivial. I thought I probably needed more bananas for potassium. Then there were folds I could initially write off as a consequence of my multifocals, or my tiredness from being a busy postdoc and mum. Then a conference trip, back when that was a thing, when I quietly noticed spasming hands, and needed help to lift my bag into the overhead locker, and found getting into the bath tricky, and fell 3 times as my colleague and I walked a short way to have dinner with friends. I was scared, even before I thought MND was a possibility. I was lucky that I could see my GP promptly, that she listened and observed and believed me, rang me to discuss blood test results, and quickly referred me to a neurologist. And that it only took a month of multiple appointments and scans and tests, interspersed between end-of-year celebrations and Christmas festivities and family holidays, until our lives were officially upended. For many, the diagnostic journey involves a much longer stretch of that terrible, fearful, draining uncertainty. This is precious time we can't afford to lose. On the 7th of January, 2013, Denzel and I held hands in the neurologist's office, tears streaming down our faces, as she told us I have motor neuron disease. She told us I would progressively lose the ability to move, to speak, to swallow, to breathe. Once we deciphered her kindly intended but frankly unhelpful euphemism of progress, we realized she was saying that the pace of change in life expectancy can vary widely, but typically people die within 2 to 3 years. Amongst the shock and devastation, I thought of our darling daughter Kimi losing her mum, of me losing her, and my world fell away. The floor, ceiling, walls, our world, everything melted and fell away. Part of the intense, contradictory, emotional mix that belted me in the minutes after diagnosis was a renewed falling in love with Denzel, as I unwittingly dragged him into this in-sickness phase of our marriage. That day also included meeting Macquarie's empathetic, refreshingly plain-speaking clinic nurse, who connected us with the excellent MND NSW and gifted us with the glorious expression shit sandwich of a disease, and our first, difficult, heart-wrenching conversations as we shared the news with loved ones. That night, despite exhaustion, sleep eluded me, and I was fortunate to read the MND Association's advice about talking with children. Thus we were prepared to answer Kimi's questions that came the next morning, explaining MND is not the kind of diagnosis that doctors can fix, but scientists are on the case, and reassuring her that it's not her fault. We can still hug and kiss, and we will always love her. Since then we have tried to gently and honestly answer her questions.
Thinking back to when Mum was first diagnosed, our lives back then were drastically different. This disease has definitely made things harder. There's no denying that. MND has put my mum in a position I wouldn't wish on anybody. I remember really struggling to wrap my head around MND when Mum was first diagnosed. It was weird because before then I hadn't even heard of the disease, and now it was something that would change all of our lives, but especially Mum's life forever. As a kid in an MND family, I asked a lot of questions and very gratefully received a lot of answers. I think it can be quite overwhelming to be in a situation like that, but with time I learned to hold on to the fact that my mum was still with me and we still had time together.
MND has certainly been a shit sandwich for me and my family. It has taken from me wiggling toes and functioning fingers, standing legs and moving arms, indiscriminate swallowing in my own voice. It has required transformation into a cyborg, with procedures and tubes and machines managing my movement, communication, weeing and breathing. Our family has lost privacy and autonomy, equal adulting and childhood innocence, dreams and spontaneity. And Denzel and Kimi have given up so much to keep me alive. MND has stolen from me walking and working, swimming and singing, cooking and coffee buying, dressing and dancing, scratching and sniffing, hugging and holding. And MND has murdered far too many friends.
We have had our fair share of hard parts. At first, accepting the situation for what it was took me a long time. It's been hard when Mum's gone into hospital, and it's been hard seeing the disease progress, to see her lose more and more control over her own body. While this is all true, I'm really so lucky that I still have time with my mum and have an amazingly understanding support network of friends and family. I can still talk to Mum, I can still laugh with her and spend time with her.
Despite the shittiness, it's possible to live a meaningful, loving, good life with MND. Different people have different ways of polishing off the sandwich. We have been lucky to have the time and support to find these 6 strategies that have helped us and may be helpful to others. 1. Carpe diem. A long month after my diagnosis, we met Dominic Rowe, our passionate, hard-working, expert, truth-telling neurologist. In the face of a confirmed diagnosis with unknowable temporalities, he gave us excellent advice: take things week by week and try to make the most of each day. This is a useful approach for everyone, and especially people with MND.
Amongst all these years our family has spent together, we've gone on MND walks, we've gotten our very mischievous cat, we've gone on amazing holidays and adventures, and we've made memories with each other to last a lifetime. Our cat became an honorary but much appreciated member of our family in 2015. He's proven to be a real comfort to the whole family, except when he steals carer's food or pees on Mum's bed. I think Mum having MND means that we are more focused on enjoying simple things together. Dad and I like to play music while Mum listens. I appreciate being able to talk about the TV news and watch films together, and it's special when we go to the park or even sit in the garden. I know Mum loves to soak up the fresh air and sunshine, to see the daffodils and cornflowers we planted, and to enjoy the antics of local cockatoos and rainbow lorikeets.
Two. Too early is better than too late. Part of the challenge of MND is not being able to anticipate how quickly it will progress. I have found myself trying to do something like press a traffic light button that I could previously do but is suddenly impossible. I have learned from experience that it's good to appreciate what you've got before it's gone. Thus I have found that where you have a choice of timing, it's typically better to go sooner. We know COVID makes this more challenging, but it means prioritize things you are looking forward to, whether it's a holiday, celebration, or a phone chat with a friend. A few months after I was diagnosed, we brought forward our planned family holiday in Japan, which made it possible to enjoy magical onsen while it snowed, a Hanshin Tigers baseball game, some of the rides at Disney Sea, and cherry blossoms as we celebrated Kimi's 7th birthday multiple times with different friends. This also applies to getting onto supports and therapies before you need them, bearing in mind that the wheels of bureaucracy aren't renowned for their speedy rotation. In some cases, there is a tricky balancing act when an intervention poses surgical risks or requires weighing up pros and cons, but it is still worth at least asking questions of your healthcare and support team. Often I have been nervous about starting to use some new equipment or have a procedure because it marks another step in my MND progress, but found once I had made the decision it brought significant improvements in my quality of life. 3. Learn to accept help. It can be challenging to rely on others when we're used to thinking of ourselves as independent, but the truth is that we all rely on others. I was somewhat overwhelmed by the offers of help that came in as people became aware of my diagnosis, and a lovely friend took on coordinating assistance from the school community. We have received such generous support, including lifts, visits, meals, gifts and donations, and practical help ranging from decluttering and dressmaking to helping me off the loo and out of the pool. Our family has benefited immensely from this assistance, both practically and emotionally. And learning to accept help early was useful for my transition to complete reliance on others for all aspects of my bodily care. I have adopted dignity is overrated as my motto, as I have learned that having others feed, wash, toilet and dress me is far superior to going without having these things done.
For those providing support to MND families, I think it's really important to be patient and understanding and aware. I remember at one point a lot of families we knew would cook meals for us, and that was something which was so simple but just so generous. Now Dad does a lot of the cooking and I've got to give it to him. He's come up with some very interesting recipes. But I think it's just really nice when people reach out like that, and I'm so appreciative of my amazing friends and family who check in and ask how we are.
4. Laugh, be true to yourself. Day-to-day life with MND is often hilarious. With carers attending to my most basic of bodily needs, piss-taking has more than one meaning in our house. And communication challenges can often have amusing outcomes, whether it's lip-reading fails or predictive text-guessing games. My bigger message here is people with MND can retain our former identities despite bodily transformation, and I think it's worth holding on to what's important to us. I still have my terrible sense of humor even though my comedic timing isn't what it used to be. For a while I replaced swimming with hydrotherapy and occasional precious ocean floats. Now I enjoy the feel of water on skin when I am showered. And I am still a 500 playing vegetarian, even though I play on my phone and eat mush. I am still a sociologist and maths nerd, even though I can't hold a pen or book. And retired at age 45. And I am still a wife and a mom, even though I can't hug Kimi or Denzel, and they do much more for me than I do for them. 5. Connect with community. While I understand that some prefer to undertake their MND journey alone, for us it has really helped to be connected to the community. This has involved taking our fabulous family and friends along for the ride, sharing the ups and downs of this strange MND life online or in person. Initially, telling family and friends that I had MND was hard, really hard. It was time-consuming and physically and emotionally draining to share news that nobody wanted to hear. But it was also precious and rewarding, a collection of conversations where we shared love and tears and stories and laughter. One special moment of community was my 50th birthday, which occurred while I was ensconced in ICU. In my former life I loved swimming and celebrated each birthday with 100 meters per year. With this no longer possible, friends embraced the challenge to do 50 of something they love. I was uplifted by a gorgeous cornucopia of 50s, performed in the garden, kitchen, bush and pool, with strong bodies, cameras, bikes and pens. The other aspect is connecting with the wonderful MND community, which friends have described as a club no one wanted to join but is nonetheless an excellent club. I could strongly recommend getting involved with MND association groups and events, and connecting via social media. I have met such great people traveling ahead, beside or behind us on this MND path. It's reassuring to know we're not alone. 6. Embrace opportunities to raise awareness. One of the unexpected positive ways we've dealt with MND is by becoming MND activists. Kimi and I have done the Ice Bucket Challenge, and written, given media interviews and talks, and been involved in social media campaigns about MND. Even reassuring embarrassed parents that we're happy to answer their curious kids' questions helps spread awareness. I've been inspired by so many friends: Adam, Ben, Bernie, Drew, Gary, Ian, Jody, Justin, Karen, Sarah and Sharon, to alphabetically name a handful, for their creative awareness raising. While it's not everyone's cup of tea, it provides a sense of agency which is often diminished by MND, and enables us to join a collective enterprise making a difference for those receiving this diagnosis now and into the future.
Since Mum's diagnosis, we've shared tough times, but we've also shared really special times together. When I was in Year 2, my lovely primary school hosted a crazy hair day. Everyone in the school dressed up their hair in all sorts of ways and helped raise money for motor neuron disease research. I think the idea that so many people, from my friends and classmates to people I didn't even know, all put in that extra bit of effort is something which is really special, and it's something which I'll always deeply value. I think that day was also quite monumental for me, because it was my first year of my mum's diagnosis, and I don't think that at that point in time my 7-year-old self had fully let the reality of MND set in. MND is such a horrible disease, and I think all of us know that by now. But there will be a time when it is preventable. There will be a time when no one will have to go through what MND does to a person, and I, for one, cannot wait for that day.
We'd like to thank the MND Australia and MND New South Wales Conference organisers for inviting us to speak, and everyone here for your care and support of the MND community. We really appreciate it. I will leave the last word to my gorgeous, resilient, eloquent daughter Kimi. She speaks a truth that demands to be heard.
MND is hard. It's furious, and it's fierce, and it's unrelenting. But even more so are we. Thank you.